Hope Not Hate have released a movie, a documentary film on Channel 4, which broadcast at the very prestigious slot of 10 o'clock at night on a Monday. And here is their poster announcing it. It's called Undercover, Exposing the Far Right. And yes, they're very proud of it. And here they are, the members of Hope Not Hate. You've got Nick Lowell's there on the phone, looking like he's in a heist film, having a very hurried phone call.
Is that not Penfold? Oh no, it's Nick Lowell, sorry.
And you've got the other members of the team who I'll introduce there. Note in particular the gentleman with the camera pulling a face like a mixture of Dennis from Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Zoolander. I don't know why he went for that pose. I mean, you've got to give it to them. The composition's interesting. They've gone for something here. It looks professional. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
However, here is the trailer, and I thought I'd show this. Although it is worth mentioning as well on this poster, before I get onto the trailer, they say a stunningly brave investigation. Of course, this is a bit of a meme, and I pointed this out, that the meme has become reality because in 2015, South Park had an episode called Stunning and Brave, where they repeat the phrase stunning and brave when talking about basically following a woke orthodoxy relating to Caitlyn Jenner.
Who's that? Do you mean Bruce Jenner?
Yeah.
I know.
Might get us in trouble, but I'm sure he's all right with it. He seems like one of the more laid back about it. He's like, I don't care what people say. Okay. So fair enough. But anyway, here's a little bit of a taster of the documentary because I watched the whole thing, and I'm not going to subject you to the whole thing, but we are going to summarise some of it. Here we go. You just get a rough feel for the thing.
The camera unit, 1, 2, 3. That's going to be the fake button.
Ooh, they're spies.
Hey.
Ooh.
Really?
They're professional
Try
spies.
to forget about it. It's going to be fine.
It's a mixture of keeping people safe and also understanding, what gives the far right their power.
Far right often present one image to the world, and what they're saying when they think no one's listening is different. And we have to be in the room when they think no one's listening.
There are a number of rules you have to follow when going undercover. You need to know your story. Don't come across as too curious. You have to be
Spycraft.
patient. Let it come to you. The far right are dangerous. Their ideas encourage violence even if they're not explicitly calling for it. And that's something all of us want to stop.
We realised there was something very dark and frightening because of connections to money and power.
There we go. That's a good point.
Dark and frightening, dangerous.
Yeah, you get the idea with that, don't you? And
yeah. I wonder what they say behind closed doors. I wonder what commie filth they come out
with
when the mics aren't on.
Yeah, there are members of the Communist Party at Hope Not Hate. So it's worth mentioning as well that some of the Spycraft aspects are not unwarranted because, of course, they have been shown to have links to British intelligence. And in fact, Connor on his show tomorrow is going to be going in great detail about who is funding them and that sort of thing, and the other more back-end things. And so I'm sort of leaving that to him, and I'm just focusing solely on the documentary today. However, we've obviously said things about this before, and of course, we've had our run-ins with Hope Not Hate. You certainly have, Bo. Would you be able to tell everyone briefly what happened, if that's okay?
Yeah, the great Gregory Davis declined to appear in this one, but yeah, I've been outed, had an expose on me that I wrote a piece that was on the Mallard that called for remigration and the outlawing of things like the Communist Party, Socialist Workers' Party, even sort of, defunding the BBC, that sort of thing. Nothing all that strong, but they did an expose on me. But it's just describing truth, reality, things I'm not ashamed that I said.
Well, it's things we say on the podcast all the time, so it's not really an expose. It's just like, we've exposed you for saying things that you say openly on the largest platform that is accessible to you.
our country has been flooded with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of illegal criminal people that we don't know what they are and what their values are, and perhaps they should be sent home.
Well, that's the majority view of the British public, and
Right.
if that's far right extremism, then so be it.
But yeah, I mean, the thing on the Spycraft thing is, I'm quite interested in all that sort of thing. In fact, I'll do some content soon all about the Cambridge Five. I've been reading around the Cambridge Five for ages, and I'm just finishing up a book about a slightly later period of the history of MI5 and MI6 called Spycraft by Peter Wright. Fascinating book, anyway. Yeah, they're still just complete rank amateurs. It doesn't feel. I watched it as well. It doesn't feel like they were given any instruction by MI6 or GCHQ. It's all amateur stuff. He's just got a little thing that he's sellotaped onto himself. It's nothing special. That was one of my takeaway things, is that they're LARPing as sort of counter-espionage dudes, and they're not. They're just...
I also found that they were sort of going for small fry a lot of the time, weren't they? They weren't like going for the big dogs. They weren't trying to, they mainly focused on Britain first, and a organisation that I'd not really heard too much about. I heard bits and pieces, which we'll get into. But I wanted to show some memes that people had replied to me about the Stunning and Brave review, because people really enjoyed that aspect of it, that they included that on their poster.
Stunningly brave.
Yeah, stunningly brave.
Their bravery is stunning.
And of course, this is a... I forgot the name of it now, turning it up to 11. What's that? No. What? How am I forgetting it? The film was... they have Stonehenge.
Yeah, what's it called? Oh, God, I can't remember either.
Samson, put us out of our misery.
It's, oh, bloody hell, it's cult classic.
It is, yeah. I've seen it loads of times. The film...
Chat again,
turn it up to 11. Yeah, chat will tell us, won't they?
Spinal Tap. Oh, God, of course.
That's embarrassing. Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah.
They've dialed both the stunningness and the bravery up to 11.
That's brave indeed. Stunning and
I'm
brave.
stunned. I'm stunned.
And this one, Touch Mean, perhaps, describes them as the Soy Avengers.
It was remarkably low T, the whole thing, the whole feel of it seemed very soy infused to me.
They seemed... as they were characterising it, they didn't necessarily seem like they were people who were in control of a situation. They were sort of reacting to the situation. They were saying, I'm scared, these people could be violent. They were sort of setting themselves up to be passive and victims, weren't they?
Yeah, classic, yeah. Yeah, cry bullies. Yeah. They go around bullying the whole world, which is to the right of them, but the second anything comes back, Joe Mulhall welling up.
Well,
because someone put some... Well, you'll probably get to it, I'm sure.
Well, we will be going through these cry bullies and naming them, don't worry.
Right.
So here is Nick Lowles, of course, everyone's favourite member, of course, the founder and CEO of Hope Not Hate. Here he is, a very sort of serious profile shot here. And here is another, Joe Mulhall, as you mentioned. He, of course, was complaining about people leaking his personal information and how afraid it made him feel, which is one of the most ironic moments in the whole documentary, because of course that is their bread and butter. Speaking of which, our friend Raw Egg Nationalist, or Charles Cornish Dale, had his identity leaked by Hope Not Hate, even though he wanted to keep it private, and he has his suspicions that there was they're claiming that they used some sort of source to do it, but he suspects that it might have been intelligence involved. But he's looking into it, and I don't know.
They're just fighting fascism, though. Like Joe Mulhall is on the right side of history because he's fighting fascism,
but
the evil spectre of modern day Nazism.
A lot of
in the form of Raw Egg Nationalist.
Yeah, he's not a fascist, as far as I'm aware.
No, not
a lot of the people
scholar.
in this, yeah,
scholar.
A lot of the people in this as well, I didn't really see much evidence that they were actual fascists. But maybe, they talk a lot about the far right. Maybe if you're being charitable, you can say it comes under that umbrella.
Well, again, their definition of anything that's far right is people that want to have a country, or want their country back that's been invaded, or the very concept that it's been invaded, the very concept that there might be any criminality among any immigrants. That's far right to them, isn't it? So,
did you find that a lot of the time their definition and understanding of the far right was quite entry level for an organisation that's meant to be studying them? I was just like, well, there's a lot more difference in the far right. You can't just make blanket assertions about, well, generally the far right believes this. Well, actually, no, there are plenty of groups that are exceptions to that. You could say that it's a very complicated thing, and some of them, or the majority of them, believe this. But it wasn't really how they were approaching it, and I don't know whether they were simplifying it just for the sake of the documentary, or whether that was genuinely their understanding, that they completely missed out on a lot of the nuance involved in politics, right?
Considering they had 2 hours to play with, or, you know, minus adverts, an hour and a half to play with, it was very, very light on any sort of actual detail or investigation or anything, really.
There were lots of scenes of fiddling with equipment that perhaps could have been cut for the sake of more depth in terms of exploration, because I was actually weirdly looking forward to seeing what they had to say about the right in Britain, because it's an interesting time to be following right-wing politics in Britain. I know that, you know, the right is not exactly prevailing at the minute, but there are lots of things going on, at least.
I thought the whole thing was sort of behind the curve, it seemed to me. Talking about Tommy. Like,
it's a bit strange, isn't it?
He's not on the fringes of the right, is he?
No.
Tommy. They've been going after him for like 8 years, 10 years or whatever. Talking about Mark Collette and PA, it's like, yeah, they're not even a registered party, and you've been banging on about them for ages, or talking about Britain First. It's like, yeah, they're not really. Or that website they did the big chunk on, what was it called? Apora or something?
Oh, yeah.
I'd never even heard of that.
No, I couldn't even find it on Google.
Never heard of it. It's nothing.
Well, it was a magazine that belonged to the foundation that they were targeting.
Which I'd also never heard of in my life.
Yeah.
Had you? The Pioneer Fund? Have you ever heard of that before?
I've heard of it in passing.
But I just thought the whole thing was sort of behind the curve, a bit out of date and super low resolution. Like, for example, but deliberately, I think. Like, they'll talk about Cable Street in passing. They'll talk about Moseley in passing. Don't talk about at the actual historical milieu or anything. Yeah, don't talk about. Well, they did that over and over and over again, didn't they? Like when they mentioned the riots towards the end, just mention, oh yeah, it was actually in response to 3 of the most horrific murders you can imagine, but won't talk about that or anything. Just
there are a couple of things going on here. The first of which is that the way that Hope Not Hate quite often targets some of the right-wing people that it is focusing on is that it smears people by association, and so. They'll have, talks about fascism, Oswald Mosley, and then they'll cut to something else that is a different thing, both temporally and ideologically. And the idea is that the audience is meant to make the link between the two. And they do this in passing out their material as well, in that they hand out reading material that will have, unironic neo-Nazis on one side, and then like a classical liberal or someone of that stripe. And it's like, these are not equivalent. They're political enemies, if anything. You're trying to present them as all far right. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, smearing by association, classic. And really, it's really lame. Anyone that knows what they're watching sees it a mile away. Like, they'll show one Molotov cocktail and then cut to Elon on Twitter saying civil war is inevitable or something. It's just, they don't actually say we're trying to smear Elon here, but they obviously, they do it over and over again.
And the second thing, and I'm curious what you think of this, is that I think the reason that they're so hot on Tommy is that he can get people out on the street, right, in great numbers. And I think that if they are these intelligence assets that people suspect they are, then that would be the point of most concern of the right. It's not necessarily how extreme you are, it's just, do you have a significant ground movement? And there's no denying, with the rallies that Tommy puts on, that he can get a lot of people to turn out on a day that he chooses, and that, to their mind, is power, and that's probably why they go after him the most. I don't know.
Because he's got a higher profile, relatively high profile, yeah. Yeah, they seem to have such a boner for him. It was ridiculous. Like, how much time and energy are you spending on Tommy? Like, they're so proud that they revealed him as Stephen Yaxley Lennon, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Like, they're so proud of that. It's weird and gross. It's like Tommy's milquetoast, right? He said Tommy's basic position is basically like, you let loads and loads of millions of people in, all Sikhs and Hindus, as long as they're not Muslim. That's not even that hard line. He's not even a really, really hardline guy.
Go back 20, 30 years, that would be a left-wing position.
Yeah, he was on My Tusi recently, and he's like, he's not far right. But yet still, they've decided he's in their crosshairs, and they decided, they'll do anything they can. I mean, it does seem that Tommy has made a few bad decisions, like getting himself arrested or getting himself done for contempt of court and things like that, missing a court case here or there. So maybe they realise, it's possible to actually get this guy.
They sort of smell blood in the water.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say, yeah. But it's all just so... One of the things that I came away from it was the impression that I already had, but it reinforced the impression that these are just really weak, pathetic people. Like, really weak. Like, we've got to get Tommy.
Yeah, it was a little bit sad, wasn't it, really? Is this how you... There was one point where they said they spent hundreds of hours sort of reverse image searching where the background in Tommy Robinson videos to find out where he is. It's like, what are you doing? Again,
it's like the CIA or the NSA trying to find out where Bin Laden's cave is. It's like, you're not like MI6.
Well, maybe they are.
Joe Mulhall with his map and the elastic bands. It's like, what? What do you think you're doing? I mean, what do you...
Well,
weirdos, freaks.
Let's go through some of the team, shall we? So here's Patrick Hermanson. He was sort of organising the undercover work, and he was the man behind the scenes, so to speak.
The handler, the mastermind, the Amazon Grease.
Exactly. And Georgie Lamming is another lady. She sort of features briefly in the documentary.
You can always see it in the eyes. Mad.
And then here is the guy who did the undercover work, Harry Schuckman, I believe.
So brave, putting himself in so much danger, going out and having a dinner.
I know.
So brave.
I know. I mean, most of his undercover work, he's in very public places, and I think he was probably...
Kim Philby's got nothing on Harry Schuckman, one of the greatest counter-espionage operatives of all time.
It is worth mentioning, though, he has got it in his blood, because I believe some of his family members, I can't remember exactly the relation, because I looked it up whilst the documentary was going on, so I only could look at it briefly. I think some of them worked for the intelligence services. So,
right.
Interesting, isn't it? That's at least what I've read. I can't confirm that yet. Connor, I'm sure, will confirm that tomorrow. Yes, exactly. It's just rumours.
I don't know. I actually don't know any of these guys. Like that really obnoxious Patrick guy with his 2,000 followers on Twitter. I never even heard of this guy before. Like I know Nick Lowles and Joe Mulhall, but all the other people, they're just nothing people, aren't they?
Well,
an empty bag of trying really, really hard
to be taken seriously.
It smacks of try hard.
I definitely got that as well.
Because by the end of it, I'm jumping ahead slightly, but by the end of it, you're like, what? So what have you actually done? What have you really achieved?
Is the final person. She also doesn't feature that much. She's not doing much of the undercover stuff, Anki Dio. But I wanted to talk about Harry Schuckman here went on James O'Brien's show. And,
of course he did.
Because of
Why
course,
not?
yeah.
Why not?
It'd be the obvious choice. And he talked about going undercover, and he mentions a couple of things right off the bat. The majority of referrals to the Prevent program are the far right, and the majority of terror convictions are the far right as well. And
that can't be right. That can't be true.
He uses that as a justification. So it's worth mentioning as well, we've talked about James O'Brien's book, in a very detailed book club. It was Harry who'd read the book, and he was explaining it to Carl and I, and it was torture, apparently. Just throwing that out there. That's on the website if you want to, have your blood boiled.
Yeah, I was asked if I wanted to be on that. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not reading James O'Brien. I can't.
To sort of put in some perspective here to what Schuckman is saying, I did a calculation here, and I basically controlled for a fair number of things. And I said, despite the media warnings of the rising far-right terror threat, Islamic terror attacks account for 96.97% of terror-related fatalities since 2005, and that is in Great Britain. So what I said here is I selected 2005 because that's when the IRA attacks ceased, and it's become sort of obsolete.
And 7/7 was in 2005.
Exactly, and so it's sort of a good cut-off point where the nature of the terror changed from Irish-related terror to Islamist-related terror, which we're still in today. And I also removed the death of the perpetrator and things like that. So that is rather than just saying the far right is on the march or on the rise or whatever, that is an undeniable fact, right? So
Schuckman was incorrect. Let's not call him an out-and-out liar. He was just simply incorrect.
I think he was mispresenting the reality of the threat here. It's not
disingenuous.
The far right. Yes, disingenuous. I think we can say that. So it's also worth mentioning as well, he's talking about prevent referrals. Well, the prevent referrals here, the prevent, if you're not familiar, is the anti-terror scheme, basically. And there was a movement, this is an article I wrote in January of 2021, to expand the definition to include the far right. And what that meant was pensioners were regarded as terror threats. And that was up by 90%, according to a government report. And there's this really damning statement from Colonel Richard Kemp, who is a terror expert, and he's also chaired the government's Cobra intelligence group, so far more qualified than anyone at Hope Not Hate to talk about this thing. And he says, I know that the authorities are trying to emphasise the far-right extremism rather than Islamic extremism. I can tell you that the threat between the two is not comparable. Of course, there is a marginal threat from the left and right, but not comparable. In the interest of trying to appear even-handed and appease people that criticise Prevent for focusing on Islamic extremists, I know they are looking at far-right extremism more to counter those accusations. The authorities have tried to inflate the threat to try and appease critics of those policies. There you go. There is someone who's probably one of the best qualified people in the country to talk about that, saying it's just BS, basically. It's nonsense.
I can't recall the last time in Britain a right-wing terrorist blew up a bus in Russell Square. Mm-hmm. Can't remember the last time he turned up at a maternity ward in a cab, blew himself up. Can't remember the last time the evil far-right anti-gay mob stabbed gay people. Don't remember the last time that happened, but okay.
On the tube as well. I don't remember them carrying out any attacks on the tube.
Yeah, all those bombings the far right did on the tube. Oh no, there haven't been any.
Manchester Arena, right. They didn't do that. Interesting, isn't it? But
so Schuckman was objectively incorrect then when he said that on James O'Brien. Okay,
and then
that's clear.
If we go back to the James O'Brien clip, he basically, the main thing he complains about is that one of the groups told an anti-Semitic joke, and he's like really upset about this.
Oh no!
Like boo-hoo.
No!
And he's also presenting it as if like, wow, this is exactly what they believe.
Let's bang up Mel Brooks then. We can't have that. We can't have that. Bloody Mel Brooks needs to spend. Is he still alive? Actually, not sure. Anyway, carry on.
So I did a massive thread where I tweeted out lots of stuff as it happened, basically to keep track of it all, because of course I was watching it live, and I'd be coming in this morning to talk about it, and so I needed to do that. And so I basically just tweeted everything that I could possibly see. And I'm going to go through some of it. Obviously, I'm not going to read all of it because the documentary was boring. It was really boring.
It was a mixture of pathetic and boring. That was my takeaway.
One of the main things that I sort of objected to about the whole thing is that they mix the timelines together and the stories. So you go from Britain First to this group, this biology group, and then back to something else, and then Tommy Robinson. And by weaving all these disparate threads together, all it does is serve to make it more difficult to follow or less engaging, because you start getting invested in one story and then it cuts to something else.
Yeah. Bit about poor Nick Lowles.
I know. There was a really good bit. I'll get to it in this eventually. But Nick Lowles admitted to, when he was a child, hiding in a tent when his family were on holiday because he was worried he'd get tanned skin.
Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
He's also, his complexion's probably lighter than mine. So what's he worried about?
We're probably about the same age. I'm in my early 40s. Maybe he's a touch older. We're probably about the same age. Kids in the 80s teenagers in the 90s sort of a thing. That wasn't a thing where someone would come back from holiday and they're tanned and they start getting bullied for being a darker shade of brown. It's just not, that just never, ever happened.
Probably the opposite, to be honest. You come back and have a nice tan and people say, oh, you're looking healthy.
Yeah, right.
That's what I grew up with, at least. But he also complained about National Front, which, as far as I'm concerned, was a non-entity when he was growing up.
Yeah, it was already... Wasn't the clip like from the 50s or something? I don't know. Well, the 60s.
There were loads of old clips thrown in there, weren't there? So he's trying to deliberately elevate the potential threat when actually it was pretty minuscule.
He was terrified his mum's going to get deported. They were nowhere near government, Nick. They were never, ever near government. So what are you talking about? Nonsense. Just nonsense. That's what they survive on. That's their bread and butter, isn't it? Lies and nonsense.
It is, yeah. So the main thing, the documentary started off with an undercover sting on the far-right race scientists, and they talked about going to a conference held in Tallinn, Estonia, which, Tallinn, Estonia looks lovely. I actually really want to go there, particularly in winter. Right. Looks like a nice place to go. I don't know why I've included that. It's a bit of a tangent, but just throw that out there. If you need a holiday destination, I suppose. They're not paying me. The Tourist Board of Tallinn. I wish. I haven't even been there myself. But yes, they talk about this, and they have a talk from Mark Webber. They're talking about...
The F1 driver, Mark Webber, wow.
Not that one. I did think that as well. I was just like, hang on a minute. He's a bit of a changing career from F1, isn't it? And they talk about the Absolute State of Britain podcast and describe it as one of the most extreme podcasts. Then it cuts to adverts with someone saying that they're into high IQ breeding, as if this was a bombshell. Just like, yes, I want intelligent people. Surely that should be what everyone wants, right? They want people to have more intelligent children. That is desirous to everyone with a functioning brain.
And plus, it's a classic thing that more intelligent people are drawn to the same. You're drawn to whatever you are. Vaguely, very, very broadly speaking. Lots of professors marry other professors, for example. Right.
Of course, yeah.
So,
it's strange.
What's the problem? Yeah.
Then it talks about Nick Lowe's background. He talks about how his mother was half Mauritian. I don't think people would particularly pick up on that, to be honest. I just presumed he was English, to be honest. We didn't even know until he outed himself.
And who cares anyway?
Yeah, who cares?
Right. Like that Joe Mulhall said one of his grandparents was Indian. So what? Who cares?
Yeah.
Oh, so we can't have a country anymore. We have to have open borders and endless immigrants because one of Joe Mulhall's grandparents was an Indian man. So we can't have borders now.
One of my very distant ancestors was Norwegian. Therefore, we have to have infinity third world immigration.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they obviously brought up the Battle of Cable Street just in passing, as well as Oswald Mosley.
Don't worry about the details of what happened that day, what really happened.
They also discussed that young kid planning to murder Labour MP Rosie Cooper. They also, this was really
so that is bad, by the way. If that is true, which
yeah.
I think it is true.
It is true.
Because he was convicted, right? So
yeah.
It's true. That is bad.
It is, yeah.
Right, so...
But the problem is that they contextualise it by trying to smear by association again. Yeah. That this kid is not representative of lots of other people, right?
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, obviously I don't support that. So they also suggested that the term evolutionary psychology is often used by the right to suggest that there is a belief in biological differences between groups. And they said this like this is a bad thing. Yeah. But for one, there are biological differences between groups. And two, evolutionary psychology doesn't... that might be how some people use it, but it's a lot more than that. I've studied a lot of it because I am a psychologist, so...
You're a postgrad in psychology, so you should know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing to worry about there. I think actually evolutionary psychology is really interesting and useful for understanding human nature and is a good thing. But maybe, they just misspoke.
The idea that there's no biological differences between groups. Are you mad?
Yeah, that's
Of course
crazy.
there are. What? No, again, just utter nonsense. They're hoping their audience are stupid, I guess.
So they talk about the Pioneer Fund and bring up Mark Collett because, of course, they go in and out of lots of different threads. Pretty boring stuff. They explain what the Overton window is, and apparently moving the Overton window, the end goal of that is to get a white ethno-state, which...
See, this is where it starts smacking of desperation. That even mentioning the Overton window, the concept of the Overton window is dangerous and worrying.
But Tommy Robinson talks about moving the Overton window, and he specifically says he doesn't want that.
Leftists talk about it. They want to move the Overton window to the left, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
just it's a bipartisan political phrase, really.
Yeah.
It's silly.
Yeah. It's silly, yeah.
I liked this, that they kept on bringing up how well educated many members of the far right are, which, just give myself a pat on the back, Well,
there's a whole bunch of postgrads and PhD or two flying around our office, aren't there?
That's true, yeah. I mean, it's funny how, the left claims the institutions, and a lot of the people that do get qualifications go on to create successful businesses rather than just being an employee in a pre-existing one, isn't it? Almost like there's more guts behind a certain group of people. They bring up Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017 for some reason. Then bring up... I didn't mean to do that. And then bring up Richard Lynn and his work on IQ. They, for some reason, claim that scientists view Lynn's work as wrong and misleading.
They don't go into any detail about why, though, or why that might be, or if that's
I covered it at university.
That's actually true.
I covered it at university, and it wasn't presented in that way. They said it was controversial. Right. They didn't say it was wrong.
No. I don't think it is.
No.
I think it's sort of objective facts, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time Peterson and Murray started to talk about that, and then both just decided they best just move on and talk about something else. Because it may be controversial, but I don't think it's wrong.
That's probably why they did it, right?
Right, yeah.
So obviously they brought up Tommy Robinson because they love him, and there was a hilarious quote from Nick Lowell saying that the first time he saw Tommy Robinson's eyeballs, he described him as an angry man. He saw his eyeballs. Ooh, spooky eyes.
Nick Lowell strikes me as someone that under the surface is boiling with rage. is nothing but rage under the surface, it feels like to me. I mean,
I'll tell you what he reminds me of.
The irony of hope not hate, that they generate hate.
In the thick of it, there's the Whip that's the rival to Malcolm Tucker with the moustache.
Yeah.
Very thinly veiled, angry. He comes across very pleasant, then as soon as someone does something he doesn't want, immediately furious. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the guy. So it goes on to talk about many right-wing commentators believe, I've got that in quotation marks, that Europe is under assault by Islam. Yeah, I mean, so do we. So does anyone with a pair of eyes. Then they talk about Paul Golding. They talk about his dating life and record him using the N-word a few times. Who cares? It's a word.
The terrible Paul Golding and Mark Collette and Tommy Robinson. Terrible. They're so terrible.
And, yeah, they show Britain First in Poland at an independence rally. Blah, 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 blah. It keeps on going on and on. I'm not going to bore you with too much more of this. Of course, they bring up the Holocaust. They talk, to be fair, to give them credit here, they talk about a 19-year-old Tommy Robinson and Britain First supporter having been arrested by the National Crime Agency, and he was reportedly found with Nick Lowell's address, and apparently he bought a gun, which they made a big deal about, which, if it is true, would be worrying, to be fair.
Yeah, again, they're conflating things that are actually a worry with things that aren't.
Like if someone has your address and a gun and states that they want to kill you or something, that is something to genuinely be worried about, right?
Like
and fair enough.
But someone like Paul Golding saying, I would like to have a country for my grandchildren, equate that with someone that has bought a handgun, which you're not allowed in this country. Like as if they're the same thing or whatever, as if they're all just silliness.
So they talk about the Human Diversity Foundation, again, that organisation, and Emil Kierkegaard, whose work on Twitter is very good. I do suggest it.
That's another one I'd never heard of before.
Oh, he's good.
Because there's the real philosopher Kierkegaard, right?
Yeah.
But this guy that's young and alive these days,
I think I've
never heard of him before.
Geneticist off the top of my head, or does evolutionary biology or psychology, something like that. But I've just seen a few of his posts about, and I quite like them.
It was quite good for the Streisand effect, actually. There's a few things, loads of things I've never heard of before. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll give them
basically
give them a follow.
A reading list twist.
Right,
And I like this part as well, that at one point it cut to ads, and the first 2 ads after the documentary were for KFC and period pads, which I said was brutal targeted advertising. I had to just include that in as just a bit of fun.
Don't expand on that.
No,
that is funny.
Course not. They obviously talked about Southport. They'd had an undercover Zoom call.
In passing the Southport thing, as in passing as they possibly could. Well, actually...
It's funny that, isn't it? I wonder why they mentioned it in passing. Is it because Nick Lowles accidentally tweeted a little bit of misinformation that caused lots of Muslims to go out and beat people up?
Oh, I was talking about the actual murder.
Oh, right, yeah.
Actual murders. I mentioned it in a bit of text on screen.
Yeah.
Very quickly and moved on. And
it's funny that, isn't it?
And actually talk about the actual horror, an actual slaughter of the innocents.
A Rwandan man went in and murdered a bunch of innocent young girls. Didn't focus on that. It's not important to them.
And maimed another 8 or whatever it was.
Yeah, of course. And some of the adults there as well. No doubt scarred them.
Don't talk about that, though.
No. But eventually they talk about something that they published in an article before the documentary anyway, that they named Andrew Conrew as the CEO, friend finder and funder of this Human Diversity Foundation. And basically the sort of finale of the documentary is that they take credit for Conrew withdrawing funding from this one project.
What a nothing burger. Yeah, slow hand clap. So I'd never heard of that guy either, but okay, he's a billionaire, okay. And then basically at the very end, they flash up some text, didn't they, which only just about caught, which I think to effect was he didn't even really know or realise that some of his money, some of his billions were being funneled that way, and he's now stopped doing it now, and he bent the knee. Diversity is great and all that sort of stuff.
No consequences, so it didn't really amount to very much. I mean, a few people probably had to look for a new job, but that was it.
Yeah.
Which is still a bit scummy, but at the same time, it's pretty small fry, isn't it? And that was it, and then it ended, and I was just like, really? Is that really it? And the final thing I wanted to end on was the usual suspects, of course. Here's The Guardian. Leela Latif, whoever she is, she says it's the bravest documentary of the year so far and gives it 5 stars. And I would like to point out another documentary that's come out this year is this one. And this documentary, I'm going to read a little summary. After suffering a spinal cord injury, a professional rugby player, Ed Jackson's world changes forever, and then it follows his recovery, and then he climbs Snowdonia, the Alps, and the Himalayas.
Wow.
I feel like someone climbing 3 mountains with a spinal injury, probably braver.
That's actually brave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, having a camera in your pocket and talking to some people posing as an investor in a fancy restaurant, or going to a meeting in public where people are sitting down and having a conversation is not brave. No one's going to beat you up. None of the people seemed like they were going to turn to violence.
Yeah.
You didn't get that impression. They amped it up, but I feel like it was over-egged.
Well, that guy, that Harry guy's kid, that boy going undercover, was in no danger at any point. It required no bravery. Sitting down and having a dinner in a really nice restaurant with people that aren't intimidating. Mm-hmm. Again, just pure nonsense, isn't it, really? But that sounds cool. That actually sounds like worth watching.
I only found out about it this morning. I was just looking at documentaries that have released this year, and apparently this is one. So there you go.
Touching the Void. If you want a decent documentary, it's a few years old now, Touching the Void. That's a good one. Don't waste your time on Hope Not Hate's nonsense.
Yeah, watch something nourishing, something apolitical, something good for you. But yes, obviously, Hope Not Hate's film wasn't very good. It's a shame it was boring. It could have at least been fun and hilarious, and it wasn't even that. I watched it so you didn't have to, and sorry for the long-winded coverage, but it was a long-winded documentary. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can watch our series Lads Hour, where we tend to have the most fun. This one was on about Batman and Robin, the 1997 film, and it was hilarious. And if you want to see all the other things we're putting out, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.